mine is entitled, If You Build It, They Will Not Come. You may have heard something else, like they will come, but actually they probably won't, and I'll talk about that in my presentation today. But I want to at least preface the presentation by saying this is called Findings from Failures. But I would like to say that I don't view what I did here as a failure. It's more of a learning, and I'll talk about that more, but I just want to set the stage there. So my project is called Expat Empire. I launched this in July, and it took about a year in the making, and let me talk about why I started it. So for me, I was very interested in bootstrapping. Of course, I started this group because I couldn't really find another good group here in Berlin that wasn't dealing with this topic. Now Johannes has actually started the Indie Hackers Berlin group, so I definitely recommend you check it out if you're interested in this topic. But for me, I want to talk to more people about bootstrapping, learn more about it, and also, of course, start my own project. I still intend to be working on as a part-time project outside of a full-time job, which I'm currently doing. But for me, it was thinking about, okay, what could I really do there? So requirements for me in general were to create a passive income stream of some sort. It may not be passive initially, but eventually it could be. It would deal with a unique knowledge or passion that I have. I could do it by myself without any other team members so that I own 100%, at least out of the gate. And also, I could do it in my own time. I didn't have to worry so much about, is this person as invested as I am? Or, hey, I can start working from 9 p.m., but they can only work in the morning, and this creates issues. So it was really doing it by myself, which also includes no programming, as I'm not a programmer, and also something that was cheap to build and to produce. And of course, online, as you mentioned. So for my idea generation, initially it was, what can I do with these requirements? And I'd always had this idea of writing a book. And the reason for that is, so I've studied Japanese since I was 12 years old. I wanted to work in Japan for many, many years, and I finally had the opportunity to do so for 2 years from 2014 to 2016. So I was living in Tokyo for 2 years, and I just had learned so much about how to find a job abroad. I learned so much about the Japanese work environment, about finding jobs over there, how to work with recruiters, get a visa, all this good stuff. So I thought, I would have loved to read this book when I was looking for a job, if this had only existed. In fact, long story short, I reached out to one guy I found the alumni when I was in university 3 times because I saw that he was working in Japan and he never responded. So I was very upset about that, but I thought, if I could just find out more information about how to get work in Japan, maybe I would have been more successful. And so I thought, why don't I write that book myself? So really write the book that you want to read. And my thought was that it could be just 20 pages. I didn't know how long, how much I had of this topic in me, but I thought I'll get it down, type it out, put it online, charge a little bit for it or figure it out, but I wanted to write a book. So I started writing this book, and I just used the Pages app on my Mac right here, and eventually it became Passport to Working in Japan. And it started really at like 20 pages, which is sort of what I thought maybe I could write, and then it was suddenly 40 pages and 60. 80. And I thought, well, I'll shoot for the 100-page mark. It ended up being 120 pages. So it was quite an undertaking. I'm very proud of the product. But of course, this is something that I thought, well, it would be nice to be able to read this book, and especially back in the day. Now I can share all this information. But does anybody else care about this problem? And in my personal experience, which is not a great thing to work from, but my personal experience, many people ask me, oh, how did you get a job in Japan? Why did you do that? What is it like? What's the work environment like? And these are people that maybe don't have a long-term interest in working there, but are clearly interested in the topic, and it's something unique and different. So I thought, okay, that's a good place to start from, and I just sort of want to put a product out into the world, so I can write this on my own time. But I also thought I'd do a little bit of idea validation. I talked about this in a previous presentation of Bootstrappers, which you can find on berlinbootstrappers.com. All the slides are there. Basically, I made a landing page through card.com or .go, and then I sent some traffic to it, sort of like Johannes just talked about as an example, through Google AdWords. And I found through that experience that actually some people were interested in signing up, even knowing nothing about me and just having a very basic landing page. So I thought, okay, I've validated it in a sense, but the important thing here is that I was trying to validate it, but only after I'd started writing it. For me, it was a lot about writing something and putting out, or creating something. It ended up being a book, but putting it out to the world. So that was my, first initial idea. So with my goals, it was, of course, to release a product, as I mentioned. Even if it's not extremely successful, at least I have something in the world. then learn as much from the experience as possible. So really trying to create the landing page, drive traffic to it, do the marketing for the book, pre-launch, create a website, just as much as I can. Learn from the experience and really dip my toes into it as much as I could about that entrepreneurial experience, and then make $1,000 in the book total lifetime. That was my initial idea. Okay, yeah, that's not going to change my finances. I certainly have a day job that I care very much about, and maybe this could be the first step on the way to financial independence, location independence, and so on. So then I can start my real business. But I started to think about it and what would that be? Because I had those initial requirements that I was going to be able to work by myself, not using programming, or at least not explicitly, and then something that I could do on the side. And so the more that I thought about it, the more I thought, you know what, I'm actually really passionate about this topic, not just about Japan, but about living abroad, because obviously here we're in Berlin, which I've been living for the last 2 years, and I have intentions to live in other places in the future and continue living abroad. So I thought, well, why don't I actually create something out of this, as opposed to just being the book and just shipping the book online and just putting it somewhere and saying, here's my new thing. Actually, why don't I focus on it and create a brand, which became Expat Empire. I create a book, which is initially the Japan book, but then in the future, Germany, other places as well. I started a podcast. I created a community and a forum to have expats around the world be able to share ideas, share concepts around, how do I get a visa here? How do I get healthcare in this country? What's a cool place to live? Why is it cool? And also to blog about my experiences, of course in Japan, which is using some content from the book, as well as my experiences here in Germany and other places in the future, and also allow other people to post to the site, so have user posts. So it became a much, much bigger concept, but it started from the book. So now that it was a bigger concept, there was a lot of things, there were tons of things that I had to do to get it off the ground. And here's basically my book writing process. I started in September of 2017, actually when I started this group as well. I just started putting some pen to paper. And it took me until April or early May to write the first draft. Then I sent it out in May to, my mom, of course, and a couple friends, and people who either had written books before or had lived in Japan. Some people have done both, and close friends of mine, to get feedback from those people. And I got a handful of actual responses with some deep comments. So I went through that. I prepared the final draft in June. And then I was focusing on a launch in July, which really involved finalizing the formatting, which is more complicated than we think. We think it's just going to be a PDF. Well, actually, people want multiple formats, and yeah, it was a lot of work. And then also setting up the online store, which ended up being through Gumroad, which is basically just a really good platform for individual creators and contributors to be able to sell their products online at very low fees. So there are other places where I ended up putting up the book, but at least initially I wanted to go from my website to Gumroad so people could purchase it there. That deals with delivery and also returns and refunds. The website building was a huge undertaking, which I didn't really fully understand at the beginning. Of course, initially I just had a landing page, which was very simple. I could set it up in an hour or two. But this website became a massive project. And so I started, of course, registering expatempire.com and all of the social media handles, and then also just putting up WordPress on the site, and then using a bunch of free plugins to create the homepage, book sales page, the about page, a lot of other pages. Also user posts, which I got through a free plugin as well, so that worked pretty well, but I had to set it up. The forum, I went through Mighty Networks, which is basically forums as a service, or community as a service. So I paid them for a year's subscription. And then legal documents and GDPR, I set this stuff up because I was very worried about it, but we'll get to why that probably wasn't as necessary in a minute. But what I used here is actually legal documents from other websites that were doing similar things. I mean, I unabashedly copied and pasted it and changed out the name. That's okay. It's enough coverage for me at this point. And I also used MailChimp for mailing lists and onboarding email for people that were signing up. So this is what at least the initial part of the page looks like. As you can see in the top, I have drop down for books, podcast, guides, social posts, community, and then there's a lot more to the page, but this is the start. You can check it out at expatempire.com if you're interested. So as I got to the pre-marketing phase, it started in June, went through July, and my focus was toward July 28th release date, launch date. The reason for that was actually my full-time job. A new project was supposed to start in August. So for me, it was like, okay, end of July, let's do this, and that's what I focused on, which might have been nice if I had a little bit more time, but at least it kept me accountable, held me accountable to it. So I had a social media campaign, which I did through Daycause. There's another one called Thunderclap. So basically what these services do is allows you, generally for free, although there's some stipulations, to be able to have other people agree to share some blurb on Facebook, on Twitter for you on launch days. It's called Thunderclap because basically like everybody's sharing it at the exact same time, all your friends, and then you're able to kind of at one time get a lot of publicity, ideally through social media. So I did that with Daycause because it was a more flexible service, and Thunderclap, you have to, I believe, have at least 50 people sign up to share your information, which I wasn't convinced that I'd be able to do necessarily, so I'm shoot myself in the foot with that one. And then I posted to all my networks and mailing lists, which of course include the Berlin Bootstrappers. If you guys are already on it, thank you for accepting my email. And I created social media fan pages, Facebook accounts, Twitter, and so on, the basic stuff. And then cold messaging with my own network, so, and LinkedIn as well. So through my own network, which was people I knew in Japan, friends who supported me, people interested in bootstrapping. I mean, I made a list of people and literally went through and sent, slightly personalized email. And, some people responded to it, so it's cool. So, that brought me up to launch day, which was July 28th. And my launch goal was originally, well, not even really a launch goal, but my total overall goal was to make $1,000 in the book, as I already mentioned. But that was lifetime. So I thought, well, what can I do to actually focus on a sort of KPI, key performance indicator for my launch? And I decided through MailChimp that I would try to get 10 more subscribers, 10 sign-ups, so people see the site. And what I offered them was basically the first chapter of my book. And they could get it for free if they sign up for the mailing list. So I thought, plus 10 subscribers, I've got 100 on there from friends, family, all my cold network marketing. And that would be 10% growth. So I thought, cool. So here's my plan. I planned out the day, like 9 to 9:30, I do this, so on and so forth. Set it up to be live on Gumroad to sell to everybody. I post it on Facebook and on the Facebook fan page. I write a blog on my site. I would email everybody the mailing lists, also people here in Berlin Bootstrappers, and pretty much all of the mailing lists that I have. I put it up on Hacker News just as a post there, on Product Hunts, as Johannes mentioned earlier, and on LinkedIn. And then in the afternoon, I would focus on, that's when the Daycause was going, so about noon. It was actually I think I had 28 or 30 people who agreed to share this content on social media, so it hit at that time. I also had flyers that I created for a Japanese event in town. My girlfriend was working at a booth there, so she was able to actually put an ad. It's very local marketing, but figured I'd put that in there as well. And then also I do an AMA on Reddit. So the reality was that, so on Hacker News, I just created my account. I think, or maybe I had it before, but I never posted. And so I had 0. And also what I realized eventually was that they want on Hacker News for posts to be able to have something for users to do when they go to that site or to consume. And my site is ultimately, at least as of up until now, or actually until tomorrow, which we'll get into in a second, it's just really kind of a book sales page. I have more content there, but a lot of it's coming soon, so I haven't built all the content yet. So there wasn't much for people to do there, and I just saw that actually even on incognito mode, even though it looked like I submitted the link, it wasn't showing up on the page, so I just said screw it and just did the rest of it. And then, not to make this story too long, but I also had an experience of posting on Reddit and creating an AMA, and it was a great experience for the first 2 hours, which is the time that I was working on it, so that you guys are done. Came back in the morning and I was completely trolled. My post was destroyed and my AMA was decimated and it was very frustrating. So I would just hesitate I would discourage people from taking Reddit as a serious means to get the word out, to be honest. So that's the reality. It was rough. So if you ask how are my KPIs, the beautiful thing is I had Google Analytics in from day one. The problem is that I changed it out through Tag Manager and tried to re-implement Google Analytics. Long story short, it wasn't working, and I didn't realize that until after the launch, so that was great. But I did use a service called HelloBar, which at least gave me a ballpark for what I had experienced. And the thing about HelloBar was that it's essentially the bar that you see at the top of the page. It's like a special thing that says, hey, you know, buy this now for 25% off. So actually I sold the book for 25% off. Normally it's $39, but I had it for $29, a special deal. And then I just basically said, hey, you know, here's what's going on. So views is basically anyone who hits the front page. And over that time, probably 2 weeks prior to launch and 2 weeks after, or 1 week after, so like around a month period, I got 1,800 views. And conversions is people, of course, who clicked on it. So at least I got some data, and I think 1,800 views is actually not too bad. But, you know, it didn't actually amount to anything, realistically. So in terms of money, which wasn't my main focus, I sold 2 copies of the book on launch day. I actually pre-sold. So pretty much a friend of a friend and a friend. Yeah, ended up being 2 people that bought copies. So I also sent out to supporters, hey, come on. I also sent out to supporters, like probably 80 people, free copies of the book. So, you know, it could have been more, but I also didn't want people to feel obligated to buy it if they were like, you know, closely within my network. For me, it was about getting the product out, right? So that was that. And then the MailChimp sign up, which is what I was more focused on, frankly, for this launch, was only about 50% of my goals of 5 subscribers across the first day or 2 after launch. So for me, this was disappointing. It was about the reaction that we had. But at the same time, I recognized that, hey, at least I got something out, right? It didn't mean that it wasn't painful, especially that Reddit post that sucked. But in terms of a possible rationale, I view it as, look, you know, most of my marketing is for people who are in my network, which they're either already in Japan, they have no interest in being in Japan, or they're potentially from my group of supporters that received a free copy. So they're not going to be the ones who are going to fork over $39 for an ebook about working in Japan. From a guy who's never written a book before, who, you know, has written some blog posts and so on, but has a brand new site and doesn't have a huge following. So that was an issue, but I recognized that, and I learned a lot of lessons from this experience. So let me share some of those with you. Similar to what Johannes said in the last presentation, don't burn yourself out. My emotional, like the picture from the emotional reaction slide is actually, it was a bit of disappointment in the overall launch. Although, of course, I got tons of support from my network and friends, people posting about it, sharing about it. I was able to actually follow through on a lot of the things that I wanted to do in the pre-launch and launch day marketing. But ultimately, I was completely exhausted. I had been burning the midnight oil for months. So, I mean, I was constantly writing and editing the book, and then on top of that, editing all of the stuff about the website, which of course I tried to make as perfect as possible for all the people coming to see it. I really wanted them to get the vision that I had about Expat Empire from the homepage and from actually visiting the site. By the end of it, actually on launch day, there was a point, like coming back from helping my girlfriend set up at the market and putting my flyers there before the AMA, where I just like crashed. Like I had like I couldn't do anymore. I had like an hour or 2 nap, got up and finished the day, but it was like clearly wearing on me. And I knew that it was not possible, it was not sustainable, not possible for me to keep going at that rate. But I just was focused on, you know, hitting that date and having as big of a launch as possible, or at least doing as much as I could. And I really think that, you know, it was not, it's not sustainable, it wasn't overly healthy, and it created sort of an aversion to focusing on the project for a couple months. And I think the next lesson I learned is that you really have to follow your passion, you have to do it for love, not the money. And I know this is a very common thing to say, but I think at the end of the day, most of these projects are going to have really tough times. And whether that's around launch day, or something goes wrong, or you lose a bunch of clients, or like whatever it could be, you're going to have your ups and downs, and they're pretty severe, especially as you're already, you know, in my case, working a full-time job, so I've got most of my energy there, and just doing this late at night, but I was really going from like 8:30 till 12:30, pretty much every night, every weeknight. So, and maybe even like 4 hours on the weekend or more. So it was intense. And so because of that, you really have to focus on what you're able to get out of it yourself and something that you're passionate about so that you can focus on it even when the times are rough. And luck plays a huge role in this, so don't think that just because maybe it was a tough one that it couldn't always be tough, it couldn't be better in the future. And over time, you really have to focus on consistency, and that's one thing that I didn't do in terms of hitting this wall of the launch day, stressing myself out, burning myself out, and not being able to really keep it going because I'm still doing it now, but I took a long break there, and I'm doing it because I love it, not for the money, because clearly it didn't generate much money for me. So I think the next lesson that I learned is to keep expectations realistic. Here I have a frame, because I think it's important about how you frame the experience. So I think that you should level set your expectations. Don't expect to make $10,000 out of the gate, or some crazy high number. Even $1,000 wasn't absurd, but given the amount of marketing that I did and all of that, given everything that was on my plate, it would have been too much to expect that. So if you mismatch your expectations, it can actually drain your energy a lot and make you feel like it didn't go well, even though I got so much support from my friends and family and everybody else in my network. At the same time, there was that feeling like, I didn't quite reach what I hoped for, and that actually brought me down. And then remember that things never go according to plan. It's really this view that, here's my goal in 3 months, I'm going to do that, but actually there's so many obstacles and hurdles along the way. The key is just to keep going and not let that dissuade you. So focus on shipping. I know everybody would love to have this beautiful package delivered to your door. The reality is it might be battered and ripped open and just not overall the best product that you'd like to deliver, but at least getting something out, especially at an MVP level, just so that people can actually see it, interact with it, and it's on production and it's out there, I think is extremely important. A lot of people get, especially when it comes to books, is like an editing process and pulling it all together and actually shipping it. They lose sight and aren't actually able to follow through. So I think even getting there to the shipping point is important. So pre-market products, if time allows. So I think for me, with the website, with writing the book, with trying to do something on launch day, I didn't probably get to do as much pre-marketing as I would have liked or would have been ideal. But at the end of the day, you have to launch. And so what I did was, in my view, the most important thing, especially given a full-time job on the at the same time. So if you're able to pre-market, I would suggest being active on social media, whether that's Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'll get to the questions at the end. Writing emails, reaching out to your network, of course putting up a landing page, sharing that on all the sites and different communities, and of course getting it in front of people that are going to care about it. And then post-launch, make sure that you're, once again, driving more email signups and subscriptions, whether that's through pop-ups or different things. I mean, don't be too annoying, but obviously take advantage of people coming to your site. Go onto blogs and social media, be careful of Reddit, but I still put it up there in case that's your thing. But most importantly, and I think that this was a key learning for me, maybe one of the most important ones, was don't compare yourself to what you're reading out there. It's very easy to listen to all the amazing stories on startups, the rest of us, indie hackers, Hacker News, Product Hunt, whatever it is. There's so many great resources and so many people have stories of how they're successful. But ultimately, it's really about what you want to do with it, what your capacity is, so that you don't burn out and so that you can actually be proud of your achievements. What I found in a lot of these stories was very aspirational, people had a lot of good feedback and so on. And I'd be like, man, I wish I was making that $1 million ARR business or this type of thing. But ultimately what happens there is that you end up just feeling like whatever you're able to accomplish is not enough. And I think that's really rough because you're just constantly comparing yourself. So I would suggest going for what works for you and also focusing on guides to specific issues like, hey, how do I launch my landing page? How do I send traffic to it or whatever that you need? But not the sort of general, platitude advice of the guy who sold his company for $100 million. I think those stories are nice once in a while, but it can really get into your head. So for me, it was good to take a step back, and actually I've cut back on my podcasts related to bootstrapping a lot because of that. I would suggest, although let's talk about different options, keeping your day job. It is very stressful and it does keep your focus away from doing the product full time. But I think it's very easy to get swept up in this idea that it's going to be extremely successful, so you don't have to worry about it because your life savings are still going to, it's going to all come back because you're going to be very successful. But what's really great is being able to be paid from your day job, funneling that money into your business, at least some of it, and then being able to grow that over time and taking the time that it needs to be able to grow, as opposed to feeling like, this is exactly what I have to do, and then feeling that time and money pressure because you see the money going down. So I think this is a good sort of virtuous cycle where you're able to invest in that while still keeping things afloat and not cutting into your savings too much, but just be sure that you don't burn yourself out. Next, I would say don't optimize too early. I just picked a random news website and just saw how many freaking things are on this page. So if you were to launch with this, I think that you'd probably spend too much time doing that. And so I would suggest that actually you focus on things that matter. And so as I mentioned about the legal documents and so on, I didn't spend too much time on it. And there was a question in the last presentation about setting up a legal company, a legal entity. I didn't do that either. I decided I would do all this on my own personal income, which ended up being a great decision because I haven't made hardly any money. So I would suggest that you don't overthink these things and don't build every single page that you think that you need for your MVP. Just focus on the things that allow you to ship on time. And then last but not least, it kind of goes back to what I was mentioning before, but be proud of your achievements. Don't have it be based too much on your KPIs or your goals. Don't have it be based on how other people perceive you, because I think those things are too difficult to be disappointed by, or too easy to be disappointed by. I think really it should be about what was the thing that I want to do. In my case, it was launching a product, it was writing a book, it was getting something out into the world, and then figuring it out from there. And I can truly say that I'm very proud of my accomplishments in doing that, even if maybe the numbers don't, they aren't these gangbuster numbers that I go for. So post-launch, to wrap it up here, I took a very long-needed break. I finished July 28th, and then I pretty much didn't pick it up until October. And I was quite honestly feeling the whole time a bit guilty, because I was like, I just launched this thing, I didn't really do anything with it, and so on. But the truth is, when I got to the computer to try to do something with it, before I could, work 4 or 5 hours straight and just be in the zone and in the flow. But now, after that experience and after just putting all of myself into that launch, it was less than an hour. And then I was like, I need to step away from this. And that's how I could tell through my body and mind that it wasn't time for me to go back to it. And also, it was the middle of the summer in Berlin, and so it was a really nice summer, as I'm sure you guys know. So I really wanted to enjoy the summer, go on some vacations, and now I've had the time to be able to really think it through and see what I'm going to do next. So with reevaluating my options, given that difficult launch, I thought, do I still believe in this idea? Did I do enough to prove that it isn't viable? Or hopefully it is viable, but do I know that it's not going to work? Is there something else that I want to do more? And how much do I really want to keep pushing? And I thought about all of these questions quite in depth, and really I still think that Expat Empire is the way for me to go, at least for the time being, for the same reasons that I talked about before, and the passion that I have for the topic. Anytime that I hear about somebody who's working abroad, whether that's here in Berlin or somewhere else, or they've been in different countries, I'm always like, what was it like? How'd you find the job? I'm asking all the questions that I want to be able to answer in my site. So to me, that showed me that it's good to still continue down this path and see where this can lead me. And also I felt like there's a lot more marketing and discovery work I can do here and learning for myself. So I had no reason not to continue. So in terms of what's next for me and what I've done since the launch, so I started back up in, let's say, mid-October. So it's been about 6 weeks. And I've applied for a trademark for Expat Empire because I love the name, and I would really hate it if somebody stole that, so that would really bug me. So I decided to apply for trademark. I put the book also on meetup and on iTunes bookstore, and then I'm going to also release a paperback version on Amazon. So I'm just trying out different channels and seeing if it can reach different people that way. I'm also releasing the Expat Empire podcast tomorrow. So this is something I've been recording since January. So I still believe that people just need to find out about this, and part of that is through SEO, part of that is through different distribution channels, whether that's with the book or the podcast. So this is something I've been recording episodes since January, and I'm finally actually going to launch it tomorrow. So I'm getting that ready. I decided not to go so much with the community, I have to wrap up here, but not so much with the community and that side of things, because basically it becomes this cold start problem where I didn't really have so many people viewing the site because it's basically ultimately a sales page at this stage. And so once I can actually get people going to the site regularly because I have good content, because they're finding it through SEO, because I'm promoting it in other places and cross-promoting, then I'll actually be able to maybe harness those people into creating new content for the site or creating a community. So that's not my focus now. But also I'll be, by the end of the year, posting in some of the first blogs related to Japan and Germany and trying to get more content up there. So still continuing forward. It is a rough couple months, but it was a great learning experience. And maybe I have time for one question, but I can always talk after the event as well. So thank you very much.
Yeah. And how do you came up with the price for the book?
Yeah, actually that's something I'd like to present on in a future topic, but the short of it is, so a lot of people, so it basically divides simply between $10 or less and above $10. The reason for that is primarily because of Amazon. On Amazon, under $10 you're able to take 70% for yourself of that price, which I think is reasonable. Above $10 on Amazon, they take, you only can receive 35%. So they take a huge portion, which is also, so I'm not currently selling on Amazon. I'll be adding the paperback, but I'm actually able to get like 50%. It's weird. The physical copy of the book, which they're producing and printing and shipping, I can actually get about 50% on, which I'm willing to try in terms of getting a distribution channel. But for me, it was really about how do I communicate value through this. So I've also on my site put up like I can do consulting if people want to have like an hour call, and I can include the book. And so it like shows value by having a higher price. I've seen that work with other people as well. And ultimately, my view was if somebody's interested enough in working in Japan to actually buy this book, then I think that they'd be willing to pay $39 or maybe $29 if I discount it. As opposed to, I mean, they'd be willing to pay 10, but then I'm not actually maximizing the value for those people, because I think it's a very niche, like specific market that would be looking for this particular book. So my job going forward is to market to those people, to find them. They're outside of my network for the most part, which is what I realized. But ultimately, if I can find them, then I would like to get sort of ideally sort of the maximum money out of them, as opposed to just, hey, I found this really unique, interesting person that's trying to do exactly what I tried to do and wants to buy my book. Well, I'll just get $5 or $10 from them. So because it's not such a wide market, I thought I'd start there. And you can always discount. It's much harder to start at 10 and then move up to 39. It's easier to start at 39 and see what the appetite is for it, and then go from there. So yeah, my time's out, so I'll leave it there, but please come up and ask questions after if you have them, or feel free to email.